Open. I'm going to go ahead and break down the top 8 for you before we dive right into the matches at hand. We have 2 matches on our camera tables, and the one we're going to be starting with is Caleb Durward against Deshaun Baylock. Caleb's playing Blue-Black Tezzeret, a little bit of a brew of his own design based around Baleful Strix, Planeswalkers, and Soul Lands in conjunction with 6 varieties of Signets. He's got 4 Talisman of Dominance and 2 Dimir Signet to help him try and turn to a Planeswalker against many of his opponents. Deshaun Baylock is playing Omnitel, and what you may not know is in my deck tech earlier with Caleb expressed that he thought Omnitel was probably one of his worst matchups. He just lost to it in the Swiss of the tournament when we did the deck tech, and that loss was actually to Deshaun Baylock. Deshaun 2-0'd him pretty easily with Omniscience Emrakul, just setting it up, taking it down, and Caleb's not super comfortable with the matchup. He thinks that because he's so oriented on tapping out for a Planeswalker, that makes him a lot more vulnerable to show and tell. He needs to do some tricky things like set a Chalice on 3 to really put his opponent in a bind. The other matchup is Thomas Enevoldsen against Bernie Wen. Tomas is playing Death and Taxes, the mono-white aggro deck, and Bernie Wen is playing a Stoneblade deck, and it's a more conventional one than we've become used to, a little less heavy on miracles and counterbalance, just a little more about the actual clubbing your opponent to death with small creatures and equipment. Tomas actually is from Denmark. He flew into Cincinnati from all the way overseas because he's stopping over here before going on to Grand Prix San Jose with another group of Danish friends who all did pretty well in the tournaments this weekend. Tomas is the only one in the top 8. I think he has a pretty strong edge in the matchup, mostly because these white resource denial decks have tended to be pretty good against the control decks. That said, Bernie's list is a little more old school, has access to stuff like Snapcaster and Swords, so he can hopefully be able to out attrition his opponent, but Tomas's deck is designed to beat those strategies, and I think he's ahead. Aether Vial, also a real problem card for Bernie, and he doesn't really have anything that answers it effectively. Moving to our off-table matches, we have Joey Andrews against David McDarby. Joey Andrews is playing Rug Delver. David McDarby is playing Blue-Red Delver. Traditionally, Rug Delver is pretty favored in this matchup. Nimble Mongoose can't be killed by anything in the Blue-Red Delver deck. It's just basically an invincible 3/3 that attacks for forever. It doesn't even get blocked very effectively. And Tarmogoyf pre-board, major problem. Post-board, still a problem, although Submerge is somewhat able to help alleviate it. So Rug Delver definitely has a Game 1 edge. Games 2 and 3, even if the edge diminishes, it usually doesn't diminish by much. I have to give the edge to Joey Andrews. I've been on the Blue-Red Delver side of this matchup, and it's never one I want to face, generally speaking. So Joey Andrews, strong favorite in that match. The other match also features Blue-Red Delver, Andrew Schneider, who has won Legacy Opens playing this precise archetype, and he's playing what I think is probably a pretty favorable matchup for him. I'm a Blue-Green Enchantress player and a Blue-Red Delver player in Legacy, and Chris Anderson is playing Blue-Green Enchantress, the combo build popularized by Gainsay, Andrew Cuneo, on Moto. Chris has taken a number of spins on the archetype for himself. He's got a lot of interesting cards here. I'm not sure how many of them will be especially helpful because Andrew Schneider is packing a lot of burn. He's got the disruptive counterspells, and he has 4 surgical extractions in the sideboard. Those are going to be problematic. This deck really hates to be surgical extracted, and between 4 Snapcaster Mage and 4 surgical extraction, Andrew can do it more times than Chris actually has cards that matter. If he gets his Cloud of Fairies extracted, it's very difficult to win. Cloud and Words of Win, it's not impossible. Because Andrew has so many surgical extractions, he can actually afford to blow them on Enchantresses without having to concern himself much about which cards are important in the matchup, which cards will keep his opponent from winning the long game. He can just trust that he'll be able to brainstorm or ponder his way into those surgical extractions when he actually needs them to lock Chris Anderson out of the game. Until then, he can take apart the engine, keep Chris from getting anything going, and Goblin Guide, Grim Lavamancer, Delver Secrets, even Snapcaster Mage, all of these are fine beaters in the interim, and there's not really anything in the Enchantress deck that favorably interacts with them. Chris can't even really afford to use his Cloud of Fairies defensively or for cycling because, again, surgical extraction, major threat. So it looks like, whilst I don't think Blue-Red Delver is always a terrible matchup for this particular brew of Enchantress, Andrew's list is built pretty well against it. So that's how I think it's going to go down. I'm giving the edge to Andrew Schneider, Joey Andrews, Thomas Enevoldsen, and Deshaun Baylock in our top 8. So we'll see if I'm right soon. I'm going to go ahead and get you back to the booth with Matthias Hunt and Zach Hall. They're going to bring you the Deshaun Baylock and Caleb Durward matchup live on SCG Live.